manufacturing, which in turn kickstarts growth, which in turn builds the economic growth story.
Another takeaway of the economic survey is that the message you get is that the pandemic recovery is complete. The economic survey also talks about the way the migrants have got back to the urban centers, which is primarily that people who are involved in MSME, which is backbone of the Indian economy, they're back at work. During COVID, we saw displacement of people, we saw jobs being lost, and we also saw economy getting reduced in its size. Now I'm joined by Sandeep Punithan. Sandeep, tell me, a part of the question I asked Rakesh about the global supply chains, but the war in Ukraine tend to have changed a lot of things for India in terms of, for example, chips, in terms of purchase, in terms of a lot of other things. There is a slower movement. So in context of managing the globe for the Indian economy, how has the government done?
I think, Karthikeya, you just have to look back about 3 years back where the Indian economy was. I mean, it was devastated by COVID. The lockdowns, economic activity had come to a complete halt. You had unemployment on a scale that had not been seen, and this was all visible. You had waves of migrants returning back to their homes. This is the kind of economic disruption that we hadn't seen in decades. And cut to 2023, when, as Mr. Khar mentioned, that you had the IMF's World Economic Outlook literally echoing India's economic survey. And there's one word I want to highlight from that, Karthikeya. It's the word resilience. Both the IMF's report as well as India's economic survey mentions this word, the fact that the Indian economy has been so resilient in dealing with these global headwinds. And in fact, the IMF survey predicts that despite the headwinds, it's going to be the strong, robust domestic demand that's going to propel the Indian economy forward. And the numbers are almost identical. They're predicting something like 6.8. The India's economic survey predicts over 6%. It's the largest, fastest growing major world economy. It's an achievement of a scale that we haven't seen in our lifetimes virtually. And it's very close to the magic figure, if I may say, of 8% growth, which is what the government needs to cater to if it needs to, get in that large number of people who are joining the job market every year.
Sandeep, we live in an interconnected world. In an interconnected world, our decisions have bearing on other countries, and other countries' decisions will have a bearing on us. I think after the Suez Canal crisis, I think this, the war in Ukraine, has a direct bearing on our energy security.
Absolutely. So, and it's after the war in Ukraine that the commodity prices shot up, the fuel prices went up, and we are so dependent on external fuel supplies. Our energy imports went through the roof, and the rupee climbed up to 80 rupees to the dollar. So despite all of this, for the Indian economy to come out and exhibit the kind of resilience that we have seen in not just one report, but in two reports, they've both given a thumbs up to the Indian economy, that despite the war in Ukraine, Russia's war in Ukraine, despite the surge in commodity prices, despite the energy prices, the Indian economy seems to have come out, if I can use that expression, India shining.
India shining. So Sandeep says that Indian economy has done wonderfully well. The political leadership has been able to meander the economic crisis, the diplomatic issues, and a war in Europe, which is, I would say, unprecedented, because if we, Sandeep, see tanks, then I think it will be after World War II. Now I'm being joined by Krishna, our executive editor. Krishna, tell me, you think, will this cheer up the markets?
It should. Thank you, Karthikeya. And I'm just going to carry on from what Sandeep just spoke about, which is, India shining clearly in terms of the big macro picture, GDP numbers, etc. There's also Indians shining. That's what the economic survey has said, Karthikeya, because private consumption, and by that I mean people going out there, Indians going out there, spending money, shopping, going to movie theaters, all of that is very robust at this point. Right now, private consumption as a percentage of GDP is 58.5% for the second quarter of the last financial year, which is the highest for a second quarter of a financial year in 7 years. Last time was financial year 2015-16. So which means that Indians are out there confidently spending money and consuming things, and that's a very good sign, because that sort of tells you the mood in the country at this stage. People are spending well, and the GDP is getting boosted by private consumption, by people's consumption.
Is it the same in the rural areas also? in context of the buying capacity?
Well, the rural areas, need to witness a bigger bounce back than what they have. And the economic survey has basically said that we've recouped what has been lost. We've re-energized what has been paused. All these words about, what's done is done. The economic survey tells you the story that all the problems that we've faced with as an economy is over and done with, and we are out on a new growth path with confident Indians spending money out there and contributing to this, because Indian economy's growth will depend hugely on boosting private consumption. That's the best way. Domestic consumption is one of the most, dependable ways of boosting a country's economy. And the fact that Indians are out there spending is very good. And I just want to make a side point to that, and that is on inflation. India's inflation management record is noteworthy. That's exactly what the survey has said. It is because, so many developed countries and developing countries are struggling with high inflation rates because of COVID and every other thing that has happened in the last 2-3 years, including the war. India has managed to bring inflation down to manageable levels. It is still extremely high, and the economic survey says that they have pegged it at 6.8%, which is 7% is the tolerance level for inflation, 6.8%. So at that level, it is high enough and at the same time low enough so that Indians are not deterred from going out there and spending. In the sense that India is sort of striking the right balance in terms of inflation and people out there consuming.
When we talk about economy, unlike the Western economy, Indian economy also entails a sense of people management. It's just not the management of the assets. And on this, I'll rope in Brijesh Pandey. When we talk about economic growth, it is also about sense of well-being. India is a populous country, so when we talk about benefits, we have to contextualize them in context of poor people, or in context of those who fire our MSMEs, who fire our economy. Brijesh, there's a portion in this report. Now, I'll read it out for you. It says the vaccinations have facilitated the return of the migrant workers to cities to work in construction site as the rebound in consumption spilled over into the housing market. This is evident in the, and then it goes on to give the figures, but it says that the migrant labor is back. You think the vaccination policies and the efforts taken by Prime Minister Modi has the social policies created an economic impetus? Has that happened?
Looks like, if the economic survey is saying about it, if you remember, Kartikeya, all these migrant laborers walking back to their place was one of the big picture which, Narendra Modi came in for massive criticism.
Correct.
Also about the vaccination, there was a lot of politics about, how this entire vaccination thing is panning out. And there were a lot of talks about how, certain individuals are being favored. I think that the biggest political criticism which BJP government, with Modi-led BJP government came in for, was those pictures of those migrant laborers walking back. So I think, it is definitely a massive fillip as far as the image of the government is concerned, so that, those vaccination has helped back all those migrant laborers, get back to the place from there they migrated to. And it shows that, the economy not that level, but is slowly, the MSME sector is slowly rebounding to a level which was pre-pandemic level. There's also, the 80 crore families which the government provided, food grains for, and ensured that nobody goes to home, nobody goes to sleep without having their tummy full, was also one of the big key social expenditure which was put forth by the government. And it looks like it has succeeded.
The biggest criticism of then Prime Minister Modi or the government was management of the migrant labor. That was the biggest criticism.
Absolutely.
The social media narrative change, then you had the narrative war. And today, to find it a mention in the Economic Survey of India, and to say that it has facilitated the return of the migrant workers to the cities, in the construction side as rebound in consumption spilled over, a part of which Krishna addressed, over into the housing market. This is evident in the housing market, witnessing a significant decline in inventory overhang to 33 months. I'm going to say, to make it a point in Economic Survey of India, is the government trying to prove that the social policies or the positions they took actually led to economic dividends?
Well, I think, the government wants to convey to us is that the fact that for something which was out of their hand, and the way they were, lampooned upon, the kind of criticism which was heaped upon them by the opposition parties, the kind of narrative which was built on social media, they're saying that, all that situation has come back to square one, and it has reached to the pre-pandemic levels. If you remember at that point of time, the government also exhorted state governments to tell them that that you will be fed. There's no way we are going to leave you at your situation. Please don't rush back to either Bihar or Eastern Uttar Pradesh, where most of these migrant laborers came from. But nobody listened to that. So I think, reversal or it reaching this pre-pandemic level is definitely a success story which the government wants to narrate.
Correct. Rakesh, I would like to draw your attention to the forecast. Economic survey also has a 2.5 page in the forecast. So before I ask you a question of forecast, I would like you to address this issue of rural inflation. Do you think that we have been able to manage that? And what sort of big picture we get in context of rural inflation and buying power?
See, by and large, we've been able to keep inflation. By and large, we've been able to keep inflation, so to say, at a moderate level. But hoping and praying that it will stay like that is a bit of a challenge. And rural stress is obviously one of the concern areas. I wanted to move back to the outlook issue. So we looked at the positives. I identified urbanization, digitalization, PLI you mentioned, but a couple of concern areas. I mean, on the positives first, there are a couple more areas. One is that 2022 was one record year when Indian small investors, retail investors, invested in such a big way in the stock market that Indian stock markets became the darling of the global markets. Will that sustain? That's a question to be seen in 2023. That also helped us cushion when FPIs went out and we had our own cushion. This is an unprecedented story because Indians don't generally invest in stock markets. So this is a plus. Demand, our friend Krishna mentioned, demand is something that is going to be a little bit of a challenge going forward because there was a pent-up demand. There was this revenge buying, revenge travel, revenge holiday, revenge eating. That might taper off a bit. Revenge eating.
That's what I remember.
Yeah. So now what I want to tell you is that now let's look at some possible negatives. The good thing about this economic survey is that it's not, so to say, skirted those negatives. It's talking about CAD, what's current account deficit.
Correct.
And, that's being realistic. So what are the concern areas? One is, like our friend, Sandeepan mentioned, we have wars still going on. We live in a VUCA world, which is not yet over. Let's be very, very practical about it. Second, demand, is going to be not as high as it was in the previous months post-COVID. That will have an impact on growth. Second and third is very, very importantly, MSME sector. Our friend Brijesh talked about it. That might come under, again, a lot of stress. Why? Because the export scenario is going to be bleak. Indian exports are already lagging because there is poor demand globally. When there is poor demand globally, exports suffer. And India's exports are fueled 45% by MSME sector. So that's again a bit of a downside. And the other big downside is that, CAPEX. CAPEX is capital spending. The center is pushing CAPEX in a very large way, which is manifest in our infrastructure story. But states are not doing matching. In fact, in the recent months, many of our states have started decelerating on CAPEX. So these factors put together could pull down the India growth story. When your exports are lagging and you still have a healthy demand, not as healthy as it was in the previous months, your imports still keep going up. So when there is a gap between imports and exports, your SCAD rises. And most importantly, all this leads to how does Government of India look at fiscal management? This is something which had been put off the radar because of COVID. People said, "Okay, let things settle down. We'll come to fiscal deficit later." Now that recovery is complete, that's the operative word in the economic survey. Recovery to resurgence is the model that economic survey is talking about. If recovery is complete, will Government of India come back to the focus of fiscal prudence? If fiscal prudence is the right thing, then again, fiscal prudence means spending less, even at the level of the center. If that happens, Karthikeya, then again growth could be hit.
May I interrupt you for a minute, Rakesh? Because if you may permit me to read the line from
please.
Economic Survey, it says, despite these, agencies worldwide continue to project India as the fastest growing major economy at 6.5/7.0% in FY23. So, what is making us do well? I was reading a news report in Guardian, and the UK's economy is going to shrink. So, you have one major economy shrinking, and we are under a stress which Sandeep Punithan spoke about in context of oil. I think this is perhaps the biggest stress which we face after Suez Canal crisis, and still, we grow. How is that happening?
As I said, demand, demography, democracy, these are our big drivers. So we will continue to perk up on these 3 or 4 key pillars. But we must not lose sight of some of the negatives, which are because not of domestic issues, they are because of external factors. And the good thing in this is that still commodity prices are, so to say, benign. Oil prices, if they still go up, then our CAD pressure will go further and we'll have a cause of worry. But as of now, fuel prices are by and large in control.
Are you happy with the figures on the infrastructure?
See, I just want to put economic survey in context, Karthikeya. Economic survey is a document which is made by the finance ministry. And finance ministry has a particular division which makes it. And it is for the government ultimately, which is the finance minister. And we have a proactive prime minister, you know how much interest he takes. He already has made a statement today on the budget where he's linked the expectation of the world to Indian budget. I don't know whether you noticed that. PM, said that the whole world will meet the expectations of the world. So in that sense, the FM and the government in totality is not obliged to take whatever the economic survey says.
Absolutely.
So it's an advisory role, it's an advisory function. And if I may say with due respect to all the incumbents in the recent past, the role itself has got, so to say, diluted. I have written about it, that how...
Is it like Planning Commission, Rakesh?
No, it's an advisory body. It looks at the current state of economy and makes certain forecasts. Like, there's been some innovation, like we had a pink economic survey, signifying women budgeting. This year, there are 3 new chapters just for the innovation. One chapter is on climate change. One is on social sector that Brajesh was talking about. There's a full chapter on that. And one chapter is on the larger issue that you mentioned, growth magnets, that identifies all these areas that I mentioned, digitization, urbanization, retail investor perking up. So also, if you put this role in perspective, we have had some big ticket guys who have manned this post. From Manmohan Singh to I.G. Patel to Bimal Jalan to Raghuram Rajan. Fortunately or unfortunately, the kind of scholarship that is associated with this role, you can imagine with Manmohan Singh being there, has, so to say, over the years got diluted because the role itself is advisory in nature. And ultimately, government of the day, with this particular government, which is very proactive, does major economic policy outside of the budget. So let's not get too excited about it, but it's a good growth-oriented document which reflects the global sentiment.
A lot of people would say that, what is left of the budget with GST in place because major economic decisions are now being taken outside the budget. But, if I get a little bit of politics into this subject of economics, I think no economic issue is divorced from politics. Our first Prime Minister, Panditji, Jawaharlal Nehru, the whole idea of Planning Commission with Finance Ministry was something which was debated. And a lot of people felt that Panditji had created Planning Commission so that he can have a foot in the Finance Ministry. And a lot of people objected to it because they felt that it's the job of the Finance Minister to decide. And then you had a huge Planning Commission apparatus which was telling the government of India what to do with funds. So I think, politics and economy, they are joined. And the first thing which Prime Minister Modi did was he redefined the relationship of Finance Ministry with the Planning Commission. And there you had Niti Aayog. Now, I'm just trying to contextualize the argument which was being put by Rakesh in context of economic survey of India. Now to you, Sandeep, with this economic survey of India in place, what do you see as the biggest challenge for the Prime Minister Modi? Tomorrow the budget is going to be in. We'll have a show tomorrow, 2 hours long. What is the biggest priority if you look at the economic survey? Where is the challenge?
Karthikeya, the challenge very clearly is managing inflation and unemployment. And these are the 2 very big challenges. While the economic survey paints a very rosy picture of where the, how far we've come in terms of being the world's largest, fastest growing economy, at the end of the day, there are enough and more surveys that have told us the fact that unemployment is rising. Inflation is a major concern for the people. So, the government has kind of proactively acted, if you remember last year, to open up the coffers and continue with the free food grain scheme. 800 million people being given free food grains for about $24 billion. I don't think there's a scheme of this size anywhere else in the world. And that is going to be the thing to watch out for in a year where the government is going into election mode, right? Karthikeya, 9 states going into the elections. I think the budget tomorrow is going to have to manage the expectations of people, to tell them that the government is there, they will continue holding their hands because of a very crucial election year, in the fact that these 9 states, it's almost 100 Lok Sabha seats that are up, these states that are going into the elections account for 100 Lok Sabha seats. It's 1/5 of India's land mass. It's about 30 crore of population. So the government is going to be very careful in managing its expectations and, of course, spending within its limits of this very crucial and last full budget.
Okay. Krishna, Rakesh was taking us through the CapEx part of it. Now, if I may read a part of the Economic Survey of India, it says, consequently, that the credit growth to the micro, small and the medium enterprises sector has been remarkably high, over 30.6% and average during January-November 2022, supported by the Extended Emergency Credit Linked Guarantee Scheme. How did this work?
Basically, what it is telling you is that the credit distribution to micro, small and medium enterprises has been done very well in the last 1 year, which basically means that these are smaller companies are able to access loans in a much better way. And that is what helps an economy very crucially, because an economy is not just about the big corporate houses. An economy to grow fundamentally well, especially India, where, which is a huge universe of micro, small and medium enterprises, also known as MSMEs, and they need credit lines to access loans, very well. So in an economic survey that says that the economy has done well, has done better than possible, how did it happen? And one, what we last discussed, which is private consumption, which is Indians going out there and spending. And the other is that the companies have done well, especially micro, small and medium enterprises who have survived the pandemic simply because they've been given great credit lines, both from the government and from the private sector. The general line of credit to small and micro enterprises have done really well over the last 1 year.
This is in context of the credit. How has small space savings worked?
Small savings have worked in many different ways. Small savings rates has to go up even further. India is always, under when it comes to the savings rates. It could do better. But if you see what has happened with bank deposits, if you see bank deposits and fixed deposits, they've done really well in the last 1 year. People have put a lot of their money into bank deposits, fixed deposits, probably because of the way the economy has been, and they're not putting it away for a rainy day. So that has done really well. So the savings rate, Indians are known to be good savers. Let's face it. We are not a country like America, which is well bent on having credit cards, and credit card being your identity of how well you're creditworthy, how creditworthy you are. But Indians are a country of savers, and they've proved that in the post-pandemic world as well. They've been very smart and wise with their savings, and the way the job market has been. Indians have reacted the right way, and probably setting an example to the rest of the world as to how to behave, financially in a VUCA world, as Rakesh Kharji just spoke about.
We have been prudent.
Indians have been prudent. Indians have been prudent both ways. India has been prudent in going out there and spending for the right reasons, and Indians have been prudent in putting money away in the right places. They're not being risky. They're not putting it in speculative things. They're putting it in fixed deposits. They're putting it inside banks. They're putting it in safe places where the money stays. It doesn't go away.
The decision makers have been prudent and the people who have written have been honest, as Rakesh was saying. And I'll reserve the toughest question for Brijesh, because, and I use the word prudent, honest together. Let me read this for you. The Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Scheme has been directly providing jobs in rural areas and indirectly creating opportunities for the rural households to diversify the source of income generation. Brijesh, you remember you covered the election of 2013 in entirety, and this was one scheme of Manmohan Singh, which was under direct attack. Now, eighth year, the last budget, and we have accolades, and we have a line written appreciating the Narega scheme.
Well, this is not the only scheme which has, after 6-7 years of being in power, has earned accolades. This being very important because this was being touted as, as a harebrained scheme of someone who is running an extra constitutional authority, the NJAC, if you remember, the others. Then, so this particular appreciation by the government of India is definitely a hint at the fact that that what all was being done before is not something bad. Now the argument is that earlier the money siphoning was there, using the old.
It has acknowledged something. It has acknowledged the scheme, huh?
Oh, absolutely. They have acknowledged not only this scheme, they have acknowledged several other schemes which were earlier lampooned upon, severely criticized, and all of a sudden change of guard saw change of stance as far as the government.
Rakesh, if you could just turn around, let me take closing comment from you. Tomorrow is the big day. All of us will be here. Sandeep Punithan, Aditya, Brijesh, Rakesh Khar, Krishna, my colleague Kartik Malhotra. Please tune in tomorrow morning at 9. We'll all be here. What do you expect from the budget tomorrow? You expect it to be a big budget? A lot of people said, Modi has given a lot of Labharti's budget, but he has not given a reformist budget. What sort of signature budget would you expect from him? I think, can I say, this is the last working budget?
Well, first of all, before I come to the budget likely tomorrow, Mr. Modi knows how to surprise you, so we should not speculate too much. But, on the piece of Manrega, which you were just discussing, I spoke to Mr. Arvind, Panagaria, who was the key advisor to Mr. Modi before he became the Prime Minister. I spoke to him in 2013, middle, and I asked him this question that you raised with Brijesh. What is your view on Manrega? Mr. Modi has attacked it left, right, center, and he admitted, and it's on record, I think I put that piece out in DNA, and he mentioned that, it's a political hotspot. So no hotspot, no Prime Minister, with whatever mandate can withdraw that policy. So there we are. But my own view as a student of economics is that, it's a policy which has got votes both for UPA and possibly for NDA as well, NDA 2, and going forward NDA 3 as well. But it's a bad policy, because it does not lead to any core economic activity. You cannot put good money for a bad, chasing bad money. What do? They look at filling some, potholes and then, reopen it and do it. I wish collective imagination of India's economic elite should have put some brains behind it, not discontinued it. It's a very important policy. It's a SOP for very, very poor people, but re-engineered it, reimagined it from a point of view leading it to a core economic act.
Creation of economic assets.
Absolutely. So it's an economic liability today.
I know what
winning votes,
I know what
getting
you're
back to
saying.
your politics or budget.
I know what you're saying. It's like the fish tanks, So every year the money is going into fish tanks to drain them out rather than building something new, something which creates a cycle of capital or circulation of money.
At one level it serves the purpose of actually meeting the requirements of those poor people. They at least have some 100 man days. On the budget, there is one huge demand that this government in the last few weeks has been
30 seconds.
Of the private sector, which has not yet happened.
Okay.
The government wants, the FM is on record to say that the private sector should unleash its animal's instinct. The economic survey today uses the word, there is an incipient growth. So we must.
Does this remind me of Dr. Manmohan Singh? Unleashing of animal spirit?
No, I think this government would go a step further and say that we've done so far. We gave you a corporate tax cut, but you have not matched the intent.
Okay.
So I think there'll be greater push for that tomorrow in the budget, apart from the soft economics that we talked about.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rakesh. So, Economic Survey of India has been tabled in the Parliament, and you saw our special coverage with my esteemed colleagues. Tomorrow, do join me at 9 a.m. We'll be doing a pre-budget discussion, and subsequently, we'll have a post-budget discussion. Thank you, all of you. Thank you.